In this analysis, we will look at the effects of import tariff of gold on social welfare by using consumer surplus, producer surplus, and compensated variation.
Import tax is also known as the tariff or import duty. It is a tax imposed by a country customs authority on imports. Commonly, it is determined by the value of the commodity, meaning that it is the real amount paid on the imported commodity, and its value is proportional to its quantity. In other words, it is a tax that is collected on imported products. There are two primary objectives of having import tax. First, import tax assists in raising or generating revenue for local governments. Second, import tax are intended to provide a market advantage for local goods. It helps to protect local industry from foreign competition.
Next is about the tax burden. Taxation will only occur when goods arrive at the country of destination and the product has a value that exceeds the criteria set by the destination country. Taxes are usually the responsibility of the recipient, known as the import duty. Each country has different rules for collecting import duties. For Thailand, if the import of gold is more than 96.5%, the importer will have to pay VAT 7%. Usually, the VAT of importing gold will be charged as usual, whether the gold is in the form of gold jewelry or not. That is to say, in case of VAT registrant selling gold, they will have to collect VAT from the buyer. If in case of the gold importer, the tax will be collected by the customs department. Importers of gold are expected to pay taxes typically because it is their responsibility to pay import tariffs. However, if the product's price was higher at that time, the seller would have to sell gold at a higher price. As a result, the consumer must pay more, which it seems to be that the burden of paying taxes is on the consumer.
Next, we will look at the producer surplus, and when we have a free trade. Actually, although the customers had high benefits, but the producer surplus decreased, and the producer surplus is known as the difference between the marginal cost to produce and the price received for goods. So in this case, producer will sell less goods with fewer gain from lower price. Therefore, to balance the producer surplus and customer surplus, tax comes in, and when there is an import tariff, the producer surplus will increase, and this increase is actually come from the customer surplus. But however, the producer surplus still less than when there is no trade.
When producer surplus rise, it helps in domestic economics. This includes the resources and the good value. In free trade, we see that the producer surplus is the least. There may be many importers who dump the price and compete with domestic. So tax can be another tool to balance and maintain domestic total welfare.
For the impact of free trade on consumer surplus, the graph depicts the area of consumer surplus when there is free trade for gold, which is the product that will be imported into the country. When the import tariff is factored into the process of importing gold, however, there are consequences of levying a tax on gold. When there is a free commerce, the gold price is at PD1 and is consumed at Q1 at the equilibrium price, which is advantageous to the producers because they don't have to pay importing tax. Additionally, there is an advantage for consumers who are willing to pay the price. However, if the government alters its import tariff policy, a specific amount of all types of gold imported into Thailand will be subject to import tariffs and tax. The policy changes the supply and demand curve for gold. The price of gold will rise in response to the additional importing tax, followed by an effective demand curve in which gold demand potentially falls as a result of the increased importing tax. The impacts of import tariff on consumer surplus. The graphic indicates the price of gold and the quantity consumed when the government imposes a tax on imported goods. When importing tax is added, The consumer surplus decreases as evidenced by the new quantity demand on the green line, which is PW plus tax. Because of the price increase, the consumer surplus area shrinks, impacting the consumer paying a more expensive price. Finally, the distance between the PW line and the PW plus tax line incorporates the significant factor of taxation into the products, narrowing the area of consumer surplus.
We have noticed that consumer surplus has decreased when tax is imposed. So it means that price change make individual worse off. For the deeper analysis for customers, we will look at their satisfaction, which derives on the demand curve. In this case, we use compensated variation in order to know how much consumers would have to be compensated to maintain the same utility level as before. And according to the graph, two goods are used. Tax is imposed on good X, which is gold, and Y represents diamond. We will suppose that point A is the maximum utility of customers. Then, when the price of gold or X increases, the budget line for X moves, as people cannot buy the same quantity as before. So the maximum utilities move to B. It can be referred that tax on one good can affect both goods actually, but however it's not always unconfirmed. By the way, nobody wants to decrease their utility, so we have to maintain them. And in order to do this, we have to create a new price level. You will see here as the red line, which is tangent with the original one. So from point C, you see that although the consumption of X decreased, but the consumption of Y increased from Y1 to Y3. Therefore, we can summarize that the decreasing in one good consumption must be replaced with increasing in another good consumption. And this is known as MRS, or marginal rate of substitution. And the area that is yellow shows the compensated variation area, which is, as I say, is the amount that people must be compensated to make them feel as before.
Moreover, from the graph, we can also summarize that there are two related effects inside total effect from point A to C. It is the substitution effect. People move from goods with higher price to the cheaper one instead. From point C to B, it is an income effect. Even though they receive same amount of real income, they have less purchasing power due to higher price. So it makes X3, Y3 move back to X2, Y2.
For the government and social welfare, government get the tax revenue from imposing import tax on the product or service, and the government use that revenue to develop the economy. This revenue has been divided into many types of budget, for example, education budget, medical budget, public transportation budget, and army budget. It has been used to improve the society and the economy. For public transportation, commonly used to improve the road that people are using. Medical budget can be linked to the present situation, such as COVID-19. The government used this budget to provide the vaccine for everyone. Education budget is being used to pay teachers who is working under the government to give everyone a chance to study, even in the urban area and other province. The budget for the army and police is being used to increase the security for citizens. Even the government used tax revenue to improve the social welfare of consumer and producer. They must be concerned about the area of the loss, because this area is showing the inefficiency of providing the tax. If the government imposes the tax, it will decrease the demand because the price is going higher and the consumer might don't want to consume or buy. It also loses their opportunity cost. The producer is the person who pays the tax revenue to the government, but the consumer are the one part of paying those tax revenue. If the government increase the tax on the product, both consumer and producer will get the effect.